Okay.
All right, if we look at the beginning of time and all these events and names of people that we put on this timeline down to the flood, so we'll consider that all in the background now of our study and of our move through the Old Testament. You'll find then that from the flood, there was 10 generations before you find another very significant character in the Bible, and that is Abraham. But his name wasn't Abraham to start with, was it? Abram. When you cited that verse, or recited that verse, those 3 verses, it said, and God said, or Jehovah said to Abram, A-B-R-A-M. Now, this man, Abram, or Abraham, is a very important character in the Bible, and he came from this area right in here. This would be what is now Iraq. Right here is Ur, and it's on the Euphrates River. The Tigris and Euphrates River come together right in here as it goes down and goes into this Persian Gulf. And God spoke to this man, and as the passage said, he said, get out of the country that you live in, and now you go to a country that I'll show you, and I'm going to make of you, Abraham, a great nation. That's a promise. And I'm going to bless you, and I'll bless you, those that bless you, and so on. And this man Abraham then obeyed God. He left his country, left his kinfolks. Some of them went with him. Lot went with him, for instance. And Lot was his nephew. He went out up this way. This would have been hostile to go across here, hostile to life, trying to go across this dry desert. So he traveled up along rivers up in here until he got to Haran, somewhere up in this area. Haran right here. And then he came back down through here, and this was the promised land. That's the reason we call it the promised land. God made a promise to Abraham. And he didn't stay here, though. He went on down into Egypt, and he ran into some problems down there. He had a beautiful wife by the name of Sarah. And the Pharaoh decided he's going to take that woman because Abraham passed her off as his sister, which to a certain extent was correct. You might read the Bible completely on that. But it was sounded like a lie. He was deceiving the man. And then when the Pharaoh found out it was his wife, then he sent him out of here, or he let him go out. And he came back to the promised land, back in this area here. Now, this man Abraham is important to 3 world religions. They trace back to him and show great allegiance to him. They are Jewish, Christians, because we, back through the Jewish system, trace allegiances back to Abraham. And then there's another one, Islam or Mohammedans. All right, that's as far as I go there. Mohammedans, or the nations of Islam, and all these folks. You see, they are fiercely in opposition to and greatly divided from these groups here. But nevertheless, they come back and pay allegiance to this man. How? Through what son? Abraham was old and he still didn't have a man-child, or he still didn't have a son, it was of great importance for a Jewish woman to bear a man-child, bear a son for her husband. Now God had said, I'll make of you a great nation. Abraham and Sarah decided they were going to help God out. I think this is an important lesson. Every time down through the ages when man decides he's going to help God out, he may make mistakes. We see people up the road here who says, I want a piano to help me sing because my singing is lousy. Well, it may be, but how do you know how it sounds to God? You're worshiping God. So you bring in something like that, and that's not authorized in the Bible. Nevertheless, he's old, and we notice that after the flood and the generations that followed, the ages of men began to drop. And we evidently see a pattern that's different now. Women could bear children only over a certain age, and men were normally fathered children not as long as they had before the flood. Men lived over 900 years before the flood. But it stated then, he is old. So it was past Sarah's time. That's according to things that are normal, but everything's possible with God. Nevertheless, Sarah said, I got a handmaiden by the name of Hagar, Hagar. It's not the comic strip character either, but I kind of remember that through that. Hagar, Hagar. You just take my handmaiden and have a child by her, and I'll get the credit for it. That's what it seems like in the Bible. So that's what happened. Abraham had a child by Hagar, and his name was, you remember? Ishmael. I think that's the right spelling. Ishmael. Now we'll pick up the connection to the Mohammedans. Ishmael later on was kicked out of that household, but let's set the stage for it. 3 angels visited Abraham and Sarah, and the Bible shows that Sarah was listening at the tent, and the angels told Abraham that he was going to be a father with Sarah, and that Sarah would bear a child. And it seems that Sarah laughed and thought, well, now how's that going to be? I'm too old, in other words. That's the thought that's conveyed. But everything, again, is possible with God. So she was about 90, and he was 99, somewhere around in there, pretty close to 100. And she conceived and brought forth a child, and his name was, anybody? Isaac. I'll put him off over here. I'm getting away from the line there, but Isaac. Now, when this child came into the household, the mama, Sarah, in effect said, I don't want Hagar and her boy around here anymore. Abraham, get them out of here. So Abram's name was changed to Abraham. Abraham then abided by his wife's wishes and put Hagar out of the household along with her child Ishmael. Well, if you chase that down through generations following, you'll see that Ishmael and his descendants began hatreds between the Jews and them. And that hatred lasted all the way down to the time of Christ. And generally, a lot of the Arabs in that area were descendants of Ishmael. And then about 400 to 500 years after Christ, they had a man born by the name of Mohammed, and they made him their savior, in effect, or their particular religious object, Mohammed. So there's your background of your hatreds, but it's also, it shows you where you go back to an allegiance to Abraham by all three of these major world religions, Jewish, Christians, and Mohammedans, or Islam, or several forms of that religion. So Abraham is important in the lives of millions of people on this earth. Now, let's look at this thing that Abraham did. God told him to get out of his country, and he left. He did what God said. So we have a statement in the Bible that says that he was the father of the faithful. Abraham was the father of the faithful. And the faith of Abraham is often cited as being very, very great. To start with, God told him to get out of this land where he was born and from his kindred and so on, and he did it without questioning. He did what God told him to do. That's the way faith is shown, by doing what God told you to do. Now, later on, about 17 years after Isaac is born, his faith is tested in the strongest way. Abraham's faith is tested. God told him to offer his son Isaac. That meant offering like you'd offer a sheep upon a pile of wood that's then set on fire. So Abraham and his son Isaac went for 3 days to a place called Mount Moriah. Now, Mount Moriah is in what's now Jerusalem, what would later be called Jerusalem. Mount Moriah is the place where the Jewish temple was built. That temple, when Christ was on the face of this earth, and one wall of it on the side of the mountain was 600 feet down the side of that mountain. Mount Moriah figures greatly into biblical history from then on down. But he went up on this mountain, and he took wood that would make the fire, or that he would use to burn the offering. He laid his son, Isaac, on that wood pile. Now understand, a 17-year-old, could you imagine somebody nowadays laying a 17-year-old down and burning him? Wow, they can outrun their daddies every time. But this son, too, was obedient. It looks to me like. I mean, I'm just putting some, I wonder what happened there. But that's what the Bible says. He laid him down on that altar, which was a pile of wood, and was ready to plunge the knife in to kill his son. But God stayed his hand, and in effect he had proven that he was faithful by the fact that he was ready to offer his son, and in a sense did offer his son. Turn to Hebrews, the 11th chapter, Brother Fay, and look down through there until you see by faith Abraham offered his son, or some words to that effect, and read that. He was ready to plunge the knife, and God stayed his hand and told him to go and get the sheep that was in the bushes over there and offer that instead. Now, we talk about something called Abrahamic faith. this is an example of that Abrahamic faith. And you might put this down because it would make a real good test question. It's doing what God says even when it is contrary to human reasoning. By the way, that's Hebrews 11, the 17th. Read 17 through 19. Read that. Have you got it, Brother Faye? You got it? Hebrews 11, read 17 through 19. You got it? Okay. All right, read it. All right. Now you see this thing we call Abrahamic faith, and he said he's doing what God told him to do, even when it's against nature. Here's his only son, and God says, kill him and offer him as a sacrifice. Well, what in the world was going through his mind? That tells us what was going through his mind. That which was going through his mind was that I'll do what God says because God will raise him from the dead. Wasn't that what you just read? It said God's able to raise him from the dead. So he was going ahead and do it and then depend on God to raise him from the dead. This kind of faith is sometimes described as the way I heard it one time. A man says that type of faith means that if God says jump through that wall right there, that block wall, concrete block wall, then it's my duty to jump and it's God's place to make the hole. That's what evidently that Abraham was thinking there. I'll go ahead and offer my son because he'll raise him from the dead. That is Abrahamic faith, doing what God says even when it is contrary to human reasoning. All right, so there is this special man in the background of so many people religiously in the Bible, Abraham, called the father of the faithful. Now, his son was Isaac, and Isaac, Abraham, his wife's name was Sarah, and then it was Sarai, and then it was A-H on the end. And Isaac married a girl by the name of, what? Rebecca. Becky. Isaac married Rebecca. Now, that's moving the characters on down, but Isaac and Rebecca had a pair of twins that are, well, let's say, main characters in the Bible. And they were, what was their name? Esau and Jacob. Which one was born first? Which one came forth from the womb first? Esau. In the Jewish system, which son gets the greatest blessings and which son gets special attention? The firstborn. So they even notice the firstborn from the womb in where there's twins. All right. In this case, Jacob came forth holding to the, what, the ankle, the foot of Esau. But Esau didn't get the blessings. Why? What happened? You recall? That's this man, Esau, How do you make his living? Hunter. All right. And Jacob was a farmer, more or less, wasn't he? Well, maybe we've had that wrong. Let's check that out. Which one was the hunter, and which one was the? Is that right? Esau was a hunter? Okay. Jacob wanted something's not panning out right. Which one offered the other his birthright for a mess of porridge? Esau offered his brother his birthright if he'd just give him a mess of porridge. And so that's the essentials of this. And later on, when Isaac was old, he couldn't see. Now, Esau, being the hunter, I think you've already proven that, being the hunter, the outdoorsman, he was the one who had hairy arms.